Italy? Whiskey? Ah, Italy, look at the never lucky Masculinity. Oh no, suddenly he... Hello, Libby! Let's begin. Indeed.
Good morning, everyone, or afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are. This is the Fireside Chat. My name is Brian Martinez, and welcome to Honey Badger Radio. Today, we have a returning guest, Phil Mitchell. He has recently come out with a brand new book. I put a link to it in the description, to the Amazon link. I assume, that there's probably other places you can get it too. It's called The Sexual Abuse of Boys and Men, Creating an Approach for Neglected Victims. Welcome to the show, Phil Mitchell.
Thank you for having me back. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on. Guys, let me know if everything sounds okay. We were having some technical issues with our streaming service, which is why there was some confusion on Twitter, and also with like our people who tend to watch us on other platforms like Rumble, Facebook, Twitch, DLive, etc. Just come on over to YouTube. If you guys know people, share the link on YouTube. And just come to this stream because this is the only place where it's at right now. So till I've had this addressed. Okay. So Phil Mitchell, last time we spoke was about a year ago, actually, 2022.
Yep.
And since then you've started writing a book. We talked about your particular wheelhouse or place of specific interest is sexual abuse of boys and men. So I guess the first thing I want to ask is, what prompted you to write the book?
Well, I think, lots of things really. So I started writing it before we met last year, but due to various complications, which we won't really get into, it's taken a while. And so what started me writing it was, one, if I'm being very honest, I quite simply wanted to get to a certain age where I wanted to say I've written a book. I wanted to do that. I wanted to leave a sort of legacy, and I kind of like the idea that once when I'm dead and buried and I'm no longer here, that there's still something left behind that might make a difference. And I think for me, I really wanted to write a book that addressed the sexual abuse of boys and men, but in a way that didn't do what a lot of the other books suggested, which was, just open up more. You've got to open up more. You've got to talk more. And not that I'm saying there's necessarily anything wrong with that, but I wanted to have a book where we addressed actually how can elements of masculinity help boys and men overcome the abuse. So rather than demonizing masculinity and pathologizing it, but what if we actually use elements of what Martin Seeger coined the phrase, what if we use archetypal masculinity to help boys and men overcome abuse? There were also other elements in books that I've read where it talked about the sexual abuse of men but not boys, or the sexual abuse of boys but not men, and I wanted to try and touch upon both. And I also wanted to highlight in a bit more detail than current books do, the particular disadvantages that are uniquely and disproportionately facing male victims, and identification as well. That's another issue that a lot of the books don't look at. If you read books like here in Rotherham with the big child sexual exploitation scandal that happened a few years ago, there's books like that look at identifying children at risk of or experiencing sexual exploitation, whereas I wanted to focus on the biases that are in place when we try to identify boys who are victims.
Yeah. About the Rotherham thing, as an American, so I can only tell you like how I've heard about it. The focus, I always thought that, or I did believe the only thing I heard about that was it was exploiting and, there was the sexual assault of girls, and boys never came up. And I knew, because I've been doing this for 10 years, that couldn't have been the whole story. So is it true then that there are, boys and girl victims?
Yeah, well, generally speaking, yes, absolutely. Not only does the official data show us this, research shows us this, I have a practice where I work with boys and men, and my colleagues work with boys and men. So we know it's definitely happening. But I think the Rotherham's interesting. So when I deliver training on the sexual abuse of boys and men, I have a slide, and I'm probably going to ruin it now for anyone who attends my training. But there's a slide where I will say, so with the Rotherham CSE child sexual exploitation scandal, as we often refer to it, there was the J report and the Casey report, and both of them kind of address different aspects of what happened in Rotherham. On one of the slides on my PowerPoint presentation that I deliver on my training day, one of the slides will say, in the J report addressing sexual exploitation in Rotherham, how many boys are highlighted as victims? And the 4 options I give them are something like 0, 10, 40, or 80. And nearly everybody picks 0. The answer is 80.
Yeah, of course it is.
And everybody's shocked, and I've gone, but it's there in black and white. Now, a lot of people might not have read the report. It's big, long, it goes on a bit, as these reports tend to do. But I think the point is that we listen rightly or wrongly to the media, and when the media have highlighted, they've talked about children and people just assuming girls, or they've talked about girls. Those 80 boys are kind of pushed to the side because they're boys. And that's part of the problem.
Out of curiosity, are there more girls than boys? Or is it about the same?
Well, I think this is the problem. So how can we answer that question, and what information do we need to answer the question? And arguably some might say, well, you need to look at data that's reported, certainly here in England and Wales, to the Office of National Statistics. No, the Office of National Statistics and the crime survey we use relies on reported and disclosed crimes.
Right.
And sexual abuse is such a hidden crime that we'll never know the full picture.
Right.
What lots of people do is they just focus on what the Office of National Statistics tells us and says that's all we need to know. No, we have to consider other sources as well and other things to get a wider picture. Plenty of boys and men will never engage with the crime survey. They'll never speak to the police, but they might engage with a researcher or someone independent. So we have to consider other sources. So the data will always say, oh, it happens more to girls. But as I said when we met last year, I would say, no, it's more accurate to say girls disclose more, they report it more. That doesn't mean it's definitely happening to them more. And actually, if we look at CDC and the data they use and the wording they use, certainly for, I think, a 3-4 year period, more men disclosed being forced to penetrate than women disclosed being raped. And I think, interestingly enough, here in the UK, we don't use what I consider to be easily accessible male-friendly language. You ask a guy, have you ever been a victim of sexual violence? No. Does your wife or girlfriend ever force you to penetrate her when you don't want to? Yeah.
Yeah,
right,
exactly.
But we don't use the latter. We don't use the latter, and I suspect it's because we don't want to really know the true scale of male victims. Because if it gets to the point where it's looking statistically like it's equal, well, that will destroy the narrative, and people will not like that. And so that's why I think, in my view, maybe I'm a bit of a conspiracy theorist, I don't know, but that's part of the problem.
No, I agree. I think that it's true. I think that men and boys are less likely to report it. They're also less likely to recognize what has happened to them as what it is, you know. And on the other side of that, I think that women and girls are more likely, and this might sound bad, but if you look at the very popular Mary Koss study that says, you know, that comes up with this like 1 in 3, 1 in 4 statistic. It's because the women were asked if they have ever, you know, had sex with a man and regretted it afterwards, and they consider that a form of rape or sexual assault. And so the girl reporting is skewed in like a larger number than it probably should be, and the male reporting is skewed much, much, much lower than it should be. And I think that is all contributing to this wider narrative,
Absolutely.
Which is why people have this sort of like default, you know, thought process that, oh, I hear lots of children are being sexually assaulted, they must be girls.
Yeah, we kind of put this huge magnifying glass up against the sexual abuse or potential sexual abuse of girls and women, but when it comes to boys and men, that magnifying glass turns into a blind eye.
Yeah, or a microscope, right? Yeah,
exactly. And it's like, you know, and that's part of the problem as well.
Absolutely. And then to that too. So I wanted to also ask, because there's a lot here that is unseen, and that's kind of what you're shining a light on. You said that other people have written about this, but the framing is very in terms of like how they're gathering the data. For example, you say that they may only focus on male victims but not boy victims. They may focus on boy victims but not male victims. Why do you think you're probably the only person that's just looking at the whole sex?
Well, I'm glad you said probably, because there might be something out there that I'm not aware of.
Yeah, that's right. There might be. Yeah.
But I think it's because there are similarities between how boys and men are abused and issues, but there are also differences. It's such a vast subject. The actual book was going to be huge, and I had to scale it down. So I think one of the reasons maybe that it's just very difficult to focus, and you might have to divide your time. So there's a practicality issue there, I think, as well. But I think the real key thing that I've noticed is that to the best of my knowledge, my book is the only one that actually explores how elements of masculinity can help boys and men. I don't think there's any other book out there that addresses the sexual abuse of boys and men. And when I've mentioned this to people, they've kind of gone, what? You're encouraging people to get in touch with their masculinity, to use elements of their masculinity to overcome the abuse. And it's as if I've suggested the most weirdest, offensive thing ever. I've gone, why not? And it works. I would not be doing this as my job if I didn't see it working. And I do see it working. And again, certainly in the last, 8 years, maybe longer, there's emerging research and literature that's come out saying, actually, elements of masculinity can be used to help boys and men overcome abuse, can help them engage in therapy, can help them do all of this sort of stuff. Whereas a lot of the books I've read, elements of some of these books will say, how can we make it easier for boys and men to talk about their feelings? Well, what if they don't want to talk about their feelings?
Mm-hmm.
What if they
the way that men express themselves is just really different from the way women. It's not that men don't have feelings, but it's that they do, they express them in a different way. They need us.
Absolutely.
It's like asking women to express themselves by going fishing and drinking beers, or going to a bowling alley or something, or playing a sport, or
the problem,
or performing some carpentry. It's not. It doesn't work the same.
Problem. Absolutely. When we are encouraging men to engage with methods that are generally successful with girls and women, and they don't, we pathologize the men and demonize them. But we'd never dream to girls and women that they need to engage with methods that work with men. Oh, there would be outrage, we'd be cancelled, it'd be shocking. And it's like, why can't we just accept that average, and the key word is average, that there are average sex differences. Sure. Men want this, women want that. And if that's what they want, and it's ethical, and it helps, and it gets to a positive outcome, what's the problem? And I'm ashamed to say it, but I'll admit it. Years ago, I was one of those guys that was very, no, men need to do what women do. Men need to open up, they need to talk about the feelings, be more verbally expressive. Oh, they're coming to therapy and they can't talk, or they won't talk. They're not engaging like women do. Yeah, these men are toxic. It's there. And I'm very ashamed that I had that opinion, but I was open-minded enough to think, hang on a minute, why do I think that? What is it about? Why am I assuming that these men that I'm seeing should engage with me in the same way that these women are? Mm-hmm. Why should I assume that? And I was of the opinion that, well, there aren't really many differences between men and women, but the science says there are differences. There are more similarities than differences, but there are differences. And whilst they might not be great in number, they are significant in effect. And that's what I learned, and I adapted my practice, and I saw the difference. And I thought, well, I was wrong.
Now you said that you did believe that, and I think that that's not really shocking. I think most people have sort of like, this sort of thing, this idea that men and women are interchangeable, but more than that men need to get in touch with their feminine side, which is sort of like the way you get your foot in the door to like push this feminine way of healing onto men. It's older than us. Like, it's been around longer than we've been alive. So we come into the world, and that's sort of like the assumption, right? So it makes sense that people believe it. But why do you think that? Other than it's just like our programming, do you think that there is another, I guess, reason or objective here? Because you couldn't have been, and I know you've thought about this, you couldn't have been the first person to say, wait a minute, maybe that doesn't work. You know, maybe men have a way of, you know, doing things that is unique to them, you know, while also, like, I don't know, allowing for exceptions. Have you thought about why that this idea is so ubiquitous? Like, is there a reason for this?
I have some theories around it. I think it's because so from a therapeutic, a counselling point of view, most of the people that enter the profession are women, and most of the people that are clients are women. That is changing, it fluctuates up and down, but generally speaking, that's kind of how it is. And I think what's generally the question that has been asked in my experience over the recent years is, how can we help boys and men engage in therapy? How can we help them engage in this therapy where they sit down, they look at someone, they talk, they express their emotions, they talk things through? How can we? But I'm not sure the question has ever been asked, how can we change therapy for men? And that's the question we should be asking. And now some people are, but I think the very fact that people were thinking, oh, we can't ask that because that saying that, well, actually, if you go down that route, you're saying that it should be this sort of therapy for men and this sort of therapy for women. Well, first of all, what's wrong with that? And it's not. But everybody thinks it's absolute. It's like, but it's not absolute. If you see a guy and he wants to come and he wants to cry and express his emotions and talk things through, and he wants, fine. If you see a woman and she wants a more solution-focused, action-orientated approach and she wants that, fine. If you see a man or a woman who want a mixture of both, fine. But what we're doing, you know, we're not therapy and sitting down and talking, expressing your emotions and all that traditional way of working. It's about how can we amend it and add it to make it more accessible to and inclusive of boys and men. And I think the problem is that some people get very protective over therapy and certain models of therapy as it is, and they don't want to change it. Other people, the idea that you would need to adapt something to make it more accessible to men when we allegedly live in this huge dominant patriarchal society. Oh no, we can't do that. So there's loads of places of kind of attacking it. And ultimately, rather than going, let's see what we can change in our therapy for men, it's like, how can we change men to get them to engage in therapy?
Yes.
Why should we do that? Why should we do that?
And you know what? Well, and that begs the question: why are men so much so repulsed or less likely to seek therapy? And I think that, you know, people will, like, again, you know, people in the profession and feminists and stuff will say that it's because, you know, of toxic masculinity, because they're fragile, but maybe it's because they know that therapy it doesn't have their best interests as men in mind. Like you've seen, I think we talked about it on the last time we were on the show, the guidelines that the American Psychological Association put out for treating men. It's all based in this feminist theory of toxic masculinity, and it's like
ideology.
It's ideological. It has nothing to do with like what men need, right? It's not. So of course men aren't going to seek that out because it treats them like an enemy, like they have a sickness that needs to be cured. It doesn't help them, and you know, again, allowing for like the exceptions or the men that sort of, you know, are not they're more likely to be expressive, and the women who are more likely to be stoic, but leaving those aside for a moment, I mean, men and women are in fact different. You know, and not in a lot of ways we're more alike than not, but in the ways that we are different, it's very different. And so it doesn't exactly, it's not, you can't make one way of being and have it be focused on the feminine and then make everything else, you know, conform to it.
And there's lots of different types of therapeutic approaches. You have person-centered counselling, which believes that, you know, human beings will naturally move towards doing what they think is good for them. And sort of emotional focus stuff. You've got cognitive behavioral therapy, which looks at your thoughts and your beliefs that you have. You've got solution-focused therapy, which is a more practical approach. You've got different types of therapy. And the very fact there are so many different types of therapy shows that one type does not fit all. Why would we think then that one type would fit, you know, males and females? It makes no sense. You know, there are differences, and those differences are not bad. They just are. So rather than apologizing them, think about how you can change your practice. And that's what the last two chapters certainly of my book talk about, in terms of how can you adapt your practice to make it more accessible to boys. And it gives a few sort of vignettes in the last chapter about using different therapeutic approaches with boys and men.
Yeah, and There was another thing I was going to mention about sexual abuse. So I've seen this. It's a very popular thing that gets thrown around, which is that, and I don't know if you've seen this, but I bet you have. One of the things that is used to sort of nullify a man trying to express like that, you know, he has suffered abuse, whether it's sexual abuse or otherwise, is that if the man is suffering abuse at the hands of another man, then that cancels it out. So I'll give an example. I was watching a clip. It's a very popular clip that's circulated in the men's, you know, rights sort of space of Joe Rogan, and he's talking to a guest about men's rights activists, and he says that they're always saying that, you know, men get raped at higher rates if you include prison rape, for example. And Joe Rogan says, yeah, but they're being raped by other men. And that's supposed to just what? I don't know what that means. Like, it's like, so because women are also raped by other women, right? Although we can't call it rape because technically it's not using a penis, but they're obviously like performing something like that, and yet we still have sympathy. We don't consider the men, because if you see men as a block, then you could say, oh, you're hitting yourself. But if you look at them as individuals, you obviously have predators and you have like victims, and the gender is irrelevant because we're just trying to address the victims, right? So have you seen that? You know what I'm saying?
Oh, all the time, the time in so many different ways. Not just with abuse, but with others with other issues as well. You know, if a man is on the street, you know, a journalist from a newspaper over here, I'd put something online. You said, and a journalist commented saying, yes, but you know, you know, it's an all, you know, women are scared to be on the street. Yeah, if you're scared, that's terrible. We want to help you, want to support you, deal with that. And it's important to know that you're safer on the street than men are. Men are statistically more likely to get killed and mugged and stabbed and hurt on the street than you. And a journalist said, yes, but who's doing it to these other men, Phil? Like, right. So it doesn't matter. It absolutely doesn't matter that these men have been stabbed and killed and mugged and attacked because they share a demographic with the person who's hurt them.
Yeah.
And the thing is, ultimately, if a person experienced any form of harm but perpetrated by another person, we would never dream of minimizing that harm because they share a demographic. But when it's men, it's like, hang on a minute. Who's hurting this man? Well, if it's another man, oh, well, we can minimize it because they're in the same gender group. But if it's a woman, then we'll find another way to minimize it and blame the patriarchy.
Yeah, we'll just go.
You can't win.
Yeah.
And ultimately it's the whole, when it comes to boys and men, perpetrators first, victims last.
Yeah, that's where I think that intersectionality is used in those cases too. So they'll if they can't do it along the lines of gender when a woman abuses another woman. Not that, and again, like, I don't care who the abuser is. I care about the abused, right? And so I don't think it should matter, but this is like these are the kind of obstacles that we're faced with. Because all we're asking is that, can we just take care of men, and can we do it first, acknowledge that they can be victimized, because that's where it starts, right? This is the joke about prison rape being like, because men are doing it, that makes it okay. But first we have to acknowledge that the victimization is real, that these people are hurting, and that, like, because they are human beings, because they are men, we should be providing them with the best services for their situation. This is why we have to get away from the sort of ideological focus in therapy. And there's like a host of other problems. I had a guest on. I don't have her name, but maybe I can like give you her contact information because you find her very interesting. She was a woman that worked with psychopaths, like guys that had committed murders and rapes, like prisoners, right? And the what she discovered, and we knew this already, but what she discovered was that the overwhelming majority, like over 95% of men that are in prison for violent crimes, have themselves been abused as children.
Oh,
and
yeah,
so
absolutely.
and this is like goes along with Aaron Pittsey's study what she discovered about women in her shelters, that they were, they had been abused as children as well by their mothers, and then they in turn will abuse their spouse, because they're usually the domestic violence situations are reciprocal, and then in turn they will abuse their own children. And so like this shouldn't be a shock to anyone, but again, it's one of these things that you want to blame the criminal. I agree, we have laws, they should serve time, but if you want to stop that, if you want to understand you need to understand where it comes from, and you have to break the cycle of violence. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. And I think often what I see is when men have committed certain crimes, you get a massive public outcry going, oh, well, lock them up, do this and all that. And we don't really put much focus on their background, the abuse they suffered. But when a woman commits a certain type of crime, she had a really tough time, she was abused when she was younger, she did all this and all of that. And that may or may not be true. But again, and to some degree, that might explain why, to some degree, she did what she doesn't justify it.
Yeah. No, of course not.
And that's the thing. So again, you see the bias, you see the difference there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that sometimes I wonder if the reason why they don't look into the sort of like upbringing of these men is that there's like this assumption that this is the state of men, and that them not being violent or abusive is like that, them trying to resist their toxically masculine urges to hurt people. You know what I mean? And I mean, it's the assumption is men are animals until they're domesticated, usually by women. But that women are, they're put into extreme circumstances to make them into violent offenders, and it's a shame. But I do think that it's a popular notion, that people have. So so you do have a section. I noticed, I was looking at your book, and I see that you mentioned Aaron Pitsey and Deborah Powney. But we've had both of them on our show. Deborah is she's been on a number of times. Yeah. So, to what extent are you using some of their work in your book?
So Erin is briefly mentioned. So it was Martin Seeger, who is a child psychologist, as I mentioned, and he was a huge help in helping me shape the book. And it was he that mentioned, you haven't mentioned Erin Pizzifield, you probably should. And I thought, actually, yeah, he makes a very good point. Why have I not? So I kind of briefly mentioned the response that Erin got when she said, actually, we're highlighting that, there's these abusive men and there's these abusive women, and it's like, cancel you immediately.
Yeah.
Kind of highlighted that. And Erin has read the book, and she's left a favourable review on the back page. So that's kind of Erin's involvement. Deborah has also given another review on the back page. So she's left a great review. But a lot of the work that Deborah and her colleague supervisor Nicola Graham Kevin has done, they've looked at more sort of coercive control and domestic abuse when it comes to male victims. So there are differences, but there are also some similarities and parallels between victims of domestic abuse, victims of sexual abuse. Sometimes it's separate, sometimes they're both. So I've kind of referenced a lot of their work and looked at how it's similar, because we can kind of, both fields I think can kind of teach each other something. Yeah,
Deborah does the I remember, because I haven't talked to her in a while, but she talks to Hannah a lot. She was doing this program where men would go on walks and hikes and it was like, I guess that was like a form of therapy, which is what we're talking about. That's good for them, and they were also adult victims of abuse. So why do you think, and it's okay if we get a little bit conspiratorial, because I have theories about this, but why do you think people do respond so poorly to like Aaron Pitsey's conclusions? I mean, it got so bad they killed her dog and drove her out of the country. I mean, this isn't just a misunderstanding. Like she was touching a nerve and she wasn't aware. And this was in the 70s. So, this has been going on for decades and decades. Why are people so repulsed by this? Why does the American Psychological Association not know better when it comes to how men should be, treated? I mean, I wouldn't think that they're dumb, because they're, they went to school, they have degrees.
Well, I should say as well, here in England, the BPS, the British Psychological Society, they have in partnership, if that's the right word to use, with Martin Seeger and John Barry, who are chartered psychologists. They've developed their briefing paper, their guidance on working therapeutically and psychologically with men, and actually it references all the science, a lot of the logic, the stuff that it should have been with the APA. So that that's been great. But in answer to your question, I genuinely think it's the narrative that we must maintain at all costs, regardless, is women victims, men perpetrators. It really is as simple as that. And if it means that men have to suffer, men are scapegoated, men are falsely accused, well, that's the price that we're willing to pay. But the problem is, you're not the ones paying the price. It's these men that are paying the price. And if the ideological view that you have of men are bad, men are perpetrators, men are inherently abusive, they're all got toxic masculinity, they're part of the patriarchy, male privilege, and all that sort of stuff, right? Well, if that crumbles in the face of logic, then you go to the other one, which is, yes, but women are victims, and women are victims, and women are victims. And it's this whole, hang on a minute, let's stop peddling this ideological, rigid, hateful, oversimplified narrative. And rather than being so black and white, let's look at the grey in the middle. Yeah. And as I often say, let's think there are types of harm that a minority of men are more likely to perpetrate. There are types of harm a minority of women are more likely to perpetrate. However, we don't talk about that. There are types of harm men are more likely to, or just as likely to, experience, but we can't focus on that because we have to focus on there is harm that women are more likely to experience, or experience just at the similar rates to men. And that's the narrative. It's all women have got it tough and it's all the fault of men. And the fact that we have so many massive organizations, the UN, the government, lots of things saying, and perhaps in some ways it's more fair to say implying, that this narrative is right, it's like, no, let's challenge that. It's just so rigidly ideological. It's almost kind of humorously and embarrassing. Yeah,
and it is coming from a lot of like very big top-down institutions. This isn't like, a grassroots thing, right? And that makes it harder to combat. So it sounds like in the UK, at least in this particular area, you're starting to like grasp at like sanity when it comes to these numbers, which is good. I do have some some messages. We call them super chows. So one of them is a question for you. So I'm going to read these really quick. So first I got, let me just double check here. I got $5 from The Leading Edge. And they say, have some money, Badgers. You guys are the anime protagonist that pushes through the energy beam attack no matter how powerful the attack seems. Well, thank you, The Leading Edge, for that esoteric comment. I appreciate it. And then we have a $12 super chow from an anonymous person. They didn't give us her name. And they said, question for Paul. Do you consider male genital mutilation rape? Because I consider it rape with a blade. There's often penetration of the foreskin, forced retraction, and tearing of the foreskin. In Orthodox Judaism, the mutilation is followed by oral sex by the mohel. In the US, most mutilations occur because women are offended by natural penises. And in countries where girls are subjected to female genital mutilation, papers show that those women would not marry a man that's not mutilated, but the men would have no problem marrying a woman that is intact. If we accept MGM as rape, then I would argue that males are raped more often than females.
Okay, well, first of all, I don't know who Paul is, but because I'm Phil.
I think he means Phil, but I think it's spelled wrong.
Okay.
So, all right, we're not answering your question. Sorry. Let's move on. I'm kidding.
I think I'm not sure. Again, this is what a lot of the arguments and debates come down to: the meaning of words. What do words mean, and how do we interpret them? Patriarchy, for example, what is that? What's your definition? What's my definition? If I certainly think that male genital mutilation needs to be taken a lot more seriously than it is, and it needs to be given significantly more attention than it currently gets. I'm not sure about rape, because then we have to look at the definition of rape. So if we look at the definition here in England, again, it's the penis being, penetrating the mouth, anus, or vagina of the victim. And so that I think what we're doing is, before we can consider that rape, we need to look at the definition of rape. rape. So I think it gets a little bit more complicated than a yes or a no answer. I think we need to look at that in a bit more detail first, because then it would be, well, if that's rape, then how many other things are and aren't rape? So I think maybe before we talk about what we define legally as rape, personally, I think we need to be looking at changing the definition of rape where it can be perpetrated by a woman, not just a man.
Right. I mean, I guess for me, and then this is a bit of a digression, but I appreciate it, it's certainly abuse. And it certainly traumatizes children, boys,
yes,
and girls, but we don't do it to girls. And we consider that, civilized. That we don't do it to girls, but we do it to boys. It's certainly abusive. It's certainly violence. It's certainly, an affront to human rights, because, it's an affront to bodily autonomy. So I don't even think it's necessary to call it rape, because it's already all these other terrible things. I understand, though, in the UK, it's not like normal practice on boys. And like, I guess, I know that Philip Davies, he did this great... He's an MP there, right? He did this great talk where he basically said that if we are making it illegal to do this to girls, then it should be illegal to do it to boys. And I understand that, I guess it's not done, but people do it anyway. Like they have someone do it. I'm not sure how that works.
I think the general, like I said, I'm not an expert on this, so I only know bits and bobs, but I think the interest is that if it's done for legit, male or female, if it's done for legitimate health medical, I have a friend who, for example, who I know went through a circumcision, but without that he would have been in a lot of pain and he needed to go through it and so on and so on.
But this is when he was an adult. This is not like when he was born, right? Or
no, not when he was born. I think he was about 11 or 12 or something like that.
Oh, okay.
He knew there was a problem down there. He spoke to his parents, went to the doctors. Doctors went, right, you need to do this, otherwise you will be in pain. And he's not been in pain since. But I think when there's something like, I believe I need to physically alter parts of your body because of reasons. What reasons? Why?
Yeah.
Why? What reasons?
Well, it's funny because, like, he mentions Judaism. Okay, so there's religious reasons in that context, but in the United States, it seems that if you don't specifically tell the doctor not to do it, they just do it. Like they assume that everyone. So my mother didn't let any of her kids do it, so I'm not. But like, I think that at the end of the day, it should certainly not be done to newborns. It should not be done at birth, because we don't do it to girls. But just by the general idea that, like, we're born the way we're born. Like we can't go in modifying things. Like
I think that's the question. Does it harm? What harm does it do?
Does it do any harm? Yeah.
Is it, if it hurts, if it causes physical pain, if it harms you, if there's any other ideological, whatever, and even if, religious, it's like, well, actually, whatever religion you do or don't believe in, what about letting that young person get to a point where he or she can make their own mind up? I
agree 100%. Yeah. If you do it, it should be your choice. Full stop. Absolutely. Unless, again, if you're, like you said, you have like a special medical condition. But yeah, otherwise, yeah, I don't, but thank you for the donation, anonymous person. Appreciate it. I hope you understand where we're coming from. So, all right. So about masculinity. Masculinity's been a very big topic lately on the internets and in these circles. One of the reasons why I got interested in doing this kind of content where I wanted to address men's issues, one of the primary things I was concerned with was the state of men and masculinity, because it seems like we're living in a time where male masculinity, as it is, and I'm not putting it in a box, I'm being very clear that there's lots of ways to be masculine. It's not going to the gym and playing sports and bro fisting people. That's a silly caricature. But I think it's very important that men are okay with themselves as they are, as men. And I think that we are bombarded every day, all the time, with messaging and narratives that say the opposite, that, masculinity should be this way and it should be more feminine. And we learned this in school with, the way that the curriculums operate, let's say in literature. So I did substitute teaching for a while, and I was the only male teacher in most of the schools. But that was weird because I was there as a substitute. The other men that were there, they were coaches and gym teachers and security guards and hall monitors and stuff, but not teachers. And I noticed that the boys, they were reading, or the classrooms rather, were reading books that I never heard of. They were like stories about relationships and stories about friendship and these kind of social dynamics. Like, and it was cool because the girls loved it, but the boys were distracted. And then when the boys are not interested, they want to read books that I read when I was a child, like Treasure Island or The Time Machine, or these adventure stories, right? That's what the Three Musketeers. That's what draws boys in. They want to see heroics. They want to learn about King Arthur. And so that's taken from them. And then when those boys don't pay attention, we medicate them because we think, oh, there's something wrong with them. So you can sort of trace this, I think, anyway, all the way down to, like, you could start from when they're born and they're circumcised, and then go from there. But I think this. So I'm very concerned about masculinity because I think that it's been under attack for a long time, and it's been a very effective attack. Testosterone levels are very low. Sperm counts are really low. Our population. I don't know if you know this, but our population is heading for a massive implosion because there are fewer babies being born and people are growing older. And so, like the infrastructure and all of the kind of support that we would normally have for people as they age is shrinking because the people who put into that system is fewer because we're having fewer families. There are, and then you have like all these men that are not able to find partners, are not able to pair up. And so you have this growing problem. And I think that at the root of it is, or at least one of the main things at the root of it is, an abandonment of healthy masculinity. I don't even want to call it traditional because it's not something that we practice. It's just our nature, and I think that when you shame it that much, I mean, we're really headed towards a cliff right now, I think. So I guess what I want to ask is, in your book, do you write about some of the things that I guess you propose as a new way to help men and boys? We've already talked about recognizing abuse and acknowledging it as real. So now I'm basically talking about what are some pathways that we can offer men.
Well, when it comes to sort of masculinity, the message really is don't think it's bad. Don't think masculinity is bad. And even if a man or a boy uses his masculinity to abuse and harm and hurt other people, that doesn't mean the masculinity is bad. It's the person. The masculinity is just the masculinity. And Martin Seeger, this is a little quote he gave me, so I can't take credit for this, I'm afraid. He said, it's like a hammer. You can have a hammer and bash someone over the head with it and kill them. You can have a hammer and build a house. The hammer is not toxic or good or bad. The hammer's just the hammer. How you use it, that's on you.
It's a tool,
and
yeah.
It's the same. So if we look at Martin's work around archetypal masculinity, which are things like elements to do with fighting and winning, providing and protecting, success, control, that sort of thing, mastering things, then those elements, they're generally seen as bad. But actually, those elements can be present as being really good. There are ways that you can fight that are positive, win, success, positive, provide and protect in a positive way, taking control in a good, healthy, positive way, and using them within therapy, whether you use the word masculinity or not, depends on the client you're working with. But actually, they can help boys and men overcome the abuse, and using those elements within the therapy, certain words that you might drop in, certain ways you might move, certain action-orientated language and movement and all of that, it can help those boys and men engage in that therapy. So it's about saying your masculinity isn't bad. The amount of guys I've seen over the years that have said toxic masculinity, oh, it's all bad, and some of them are angry because they don't like being told that. Others are going, well, it must be true because everyone in my life is saying it, people online are saying it, I've media, and I've gone, yeah, but what does that mean? What does it mean? What have they said and all of that? What does your masculinity mean to you? What is it not? And often reframing it. So, saying things such as, I worked with a guy and he was attacked. And the guy the guy that attacked him, once he'd hit him, he ran off. And he basically said, well, I'm not a real man. I'm not a real man. So we had to discuss what is a real man? What does that mean? And, biological man, ideological, what does that mean? So we explored that. He says, I'm just weak and I'm pathetic and all of this. And says, okay, so you think your masculinity has been threatened? Yeah, okay. I says, okay, so let me ask you something. So you've got this guy. He is with you. He's sort of squaring up to you. You're on a vehicle, and then all of a sudden the doors open, and when the doors open, this guy assaults you and then legs it. And that's so. Do you think he did that because he might have been scared of you?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Do you think he's scared of you because you present as a masculine threat or not? Or what? Oh, I never thought of it like that. Ah, got you. So as soon as they start to say that, I never thought of it like that, you know that their thinking is changing and they perceive their situation differently. And for him, he's like, that's great. I feel better. I see myself as different. And actually, yeah, he probably did hit me and leg it because he knows that I'd have clobbered him one or have stood up to him and all that. And that's why, yeah. So actually, you are still a big strong man. And there's nothing wrong with your masculinity. It's your perception of it that might be a little bit problematic, but we can work on that. So reframing and getting people to see that it's not bad. And the amount of guys I've spoken to, I've had similar conversations like this and get them to see it. They've gone, I never thought of it like that. Oh, I suppose actually my masculinity, without my masculinity, I wouldn't be where I am in life now. I wouldn't have succeeded in the way I have. And I'd have never thought of it like that. Right. So maybe, how you've used those elements of your masculinity has been good for you and your family. Yeah. How can that be bad?
Yeah. Of course.
And so it helps them see that, but they're so ideological rubbish put in their head, and it's like trying to get out and let's maybe see it differently.
I agree. Yeah, 100%. I did get another super chow as a follow-up from the same anonymous person before. They gave us another $5 and says, sorry, Phil, I'm a bit dyslexic. So
that's fine.
Apologize for getting your name wrong.
I've been called worse things than Paul, so don't worry.
So, when you mentioned the hammer, I thought about something. So I'm like really into stories, and I think that stories are very important to our culture, and it tells us about ourselves, especially when they are about like reality. If they're truthful, and I mean truthful in the sense that not that they're factually accurate or historically accurate, but truthful in the sense that they say something about the human condition, like a universal thing. And one thing I thought about was the myth, the Norse god of thunder, Thor, who wields a hammer, right? And in the reason why he wielded a hammer, from what I understand, is that the hammer can be used, as you said, either to build or to destroy. And so and a man is like that too, right? And I think that all of this really negative messaging that men get, I think that to some degree, it does kind of condition them to resent their identity, like their masculinity, because if you notice, like, we live in a world now where we have all of these genders and there's all of this broad ways of seeing things, and there's you can be this far on the feminine side and like whatever, but there's not really a space that's just for men who are masculine. Like, that's kind of excluded. It's like there really is two genders. There's like all of the other genders, including women, and then there's just men. So you see this kind of like, if you look at it as like the rainbow, no pun intended, but like the spectrum, and on the very end it starts with red. That's masculinity, and all the other colors are all the other genders, going all the way to the ultraviolet spectrum. And I think that this exclusion is palpable. Men can feel that, and I think this is why they're confused, they're frustrated, they're angry, and it's affecting women too, because most women like masculine men. I mean, when I say masculine, I don't mean they go to the gym every day and they're bodybuilding. I mean that they are sort of a person that recognizes their impact on the world. Does that make sense? So if they could be intellectual, they could be fatherly, they could be athletic, whatever. They could be learning a skill. They could be artists, but they're aware of the impact that their actions have on the world. I think that is how the simplest way to frame it. And the thing is that women could benefit from that too, because women can also have a sense of their own impact on the world. And since we're always painting women as victims, we act like they have no impact whatsoever, and men have all of the impact. Do you see what I'm saying?
Absolutely. And I think it's more than reasonable to say that many, maybe even most of the women in the world today with a male partner, they have that male partner because, or partly because, they were attracted to some sort of display of masculinity.
Yes.
And so there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I think when we say the word masculinity now, we immediately jump to the extreme, the harmful, and it's like, hang on, no. And again, it's like that's masculinity being used in a certain way or being displayed in a certain way. There's other ways it's being displayed. The elements, the traits, if we call it that, are there, but actually how they're displayed is a different issue, perhaps.
Yes, absolutely. So speaking of, I assume that you know about the Johnny Depp trial. I think that you mentioned it in the
I know a little bit about it.
Yeah, a little bit. I hear people have been talking about it. It's been going around.
Nick Wallace, who was the investigative journalist, and I know that some people have got different views on some of his work. I did an interview with him and he, about the Johnny Depp trial, and I specifically focused on the issue of when Johnny Depp wanted to walk away and Amber Heard would not let him, or she'd follow him. And that's a massive part of the work I do with a lot of boys and men, where it's like, what walk away is you taking control, but your partner needs to let you. And then, there's sort of discussions around that. So that was one of the things I spoke to Nick about the Johnny Depp trial. So yes, I'm familiar. I don't know everything about it, I will say.
Yeah.
I'm rewatching the trial at the minute. It's a big, long thing, but yeah, absolutely. I'm familiar with it, yeah.
Yeah, so what about the response? Because I think that's more important. So we had two trials. Johnny Depp was up against The Sun, right? And I know that you're aware of that. And he lost that case. And so then he also had another trial with Amber Heard, which was right here in Virginia. And I went to there was a day after the verdict where I got to meet the lawyers, briefly and talk to them. And they were very nice. Even the lawyers for Heard were nice too. But there is a narrative that's come out. So there's two stories, okay? You have the media's narrative, which is that Johnny Depp somehow managed to get away with being an abuser, and what the media does is they cite he lost this case with The Sun, therefore no other cases matter, even though the case against The Sun and the case against Heard are different. And it makes me wonder, like, why are they fighting this so hard? And I think it's about this narrative. But then you have the response on social media, and I've noticed more support for male victims in this particular case from women than I have for anything else. Now, a lot of it probably has to do with the fact that he's Johnny Depp, and maybe kind of a heartthrob, but maybe. But I do think that it is making people aware that male victims can exist, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the interest, there's certainly many comments out there, so as a, I've been attacked. Like I had a few death threats from people supporting Amber Heard. We're going to find
really?
out. Oh yeah. Not many, but a few. Yeah, horrible stuff. And it's a case of, well, you know what? Look, this is my view. If you disagree, fine. But this is my view. You're not going to, I've watched the trial. I've done all of that. I think what's interesting is so I'm a gay man, and a lot of people follow me on Twitter that know that I'm a gay man, and they've often said, Phil, give it a rest. Johnny Depp is not going to want to get into bed with you. And my response is, what? Really? He's not? Oh my God, I've been doing this for nothing all this time. Oh my God, how stupid can you be?
Yeah, really.
I don't care who he is, what he is. I care about the fact that he's a man that has been abused, and it's another example of how some female perpetrators will manipulate and weaponize the concept of victimhood to portray themselves as the perpetrator. They are the victim. And the thing is, the information from the trial in the UK, all of the information that was used to label him as a wife beater, that information was assessed in a lot more detail over a longer period via a more rigorous way. and it was looked at in a lot more detail, and the bottom line is a jury unanimously found that she defamed with malice on all counts. That is never going to change. She did not appeal, and I don't blame her. I think, and so I think the thing, on the day that Johnny Depp took the stand, I got 3 phone calls from 3 men who had said they'd seen Johnny Depp on the stand, what happened to him sort of happened to them, and they now want to deal with it and they want therapy. And so actually, and I'm just one guy that had three phone calls in one day from men that had been abused by their exes, and seeing Depp made them think, I'm going to say something, I'm going to talk to someone. That's brilliant. That's an amazing outcome. And just because, tabloids don't have the best reputation at the best of times. And so I think ultimately, just because 1, 2, or a handful of journalists with perhaps a biased ideological mindset who have got the power to print a newspaper that goes out to hundreds of thousands of people across the country, they are still individual people with their own views and opinions. They just put them in the paper. Doesn't mean it's right. Doesn't mean it's right at all. And again, people watched the trial. People were invested. They saw it from start to finish. And you can put any twist on it. You can put your opinion on it. Well, I believe he did that because of this. I believe she... Fine. You can debate, disagree, and all of that sort of stuff. But we've heard, so much embarrassing commentary that really, I just don't know how you can come back from that, where, Camille Vasquez absolutely shredded her to pieces on the stand.
She did.
She
absolutely.
Was great.
Yes, she was very good. And once again, guys, just a reminder really quick, because we're getting close to the end here. The book is The Sexual Abuse of Boys and Men, Creating an Approach for Neglected Victims. You can get it on Amazon. I put a link in the descriptions. You can look at it. Do you think, would it be a good idea to have you ever considered getting an audiobook made?
So it's something I've been speaking to the publishers about. We're in discussions. It might be, there's certainly going to be a ebook coming out in a few weeks.
Okay.
And I think, I'm not an expert, but I think with the ebook, that comes with some sort of audio stuff built in. But I'm not sure about an audio thing just yet. We're in discussions about it.
Yeah. All right. Well, I hope you do. And if you do, maybe get, I don't know, somebody famous to do it.
Well, that might be a big ask. But Johnny Depp to do it. He needs to get Johnny Depp to do it. He needs something to do,
to get Johnny Depp to do it. Or, Greg Ellis. He's a good friend of Johnny Depp's, and I had him on the show. You know who Greg Ellis is?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. I took part. I asked him and... oh gosh, I can't remember her name. Isn't that terrible? Him and a female actress, Sophia Myles. They did a podcast together, and I asked a question, and so I briefly spoke to them both, and they were both lovely. So yeah. Yeah,
I think it would be great. I mean, I'm sure it's a fantastic book, and I'm glad that it exists. I think we need more stuff like this. Hopefully, it will sell well, and then other people writing on this subject will sort of broaden their horizons, So so the Johnny Depp thing was kind of a milestone, I think.
Yes.
Because it did, like you said, I think there were men who were watching this unfold and they were like, I mean, holy shit, I think I've been through something like this, or I can't believe that this is actually being put out, because I think what happens with a lot of men who are abused is they don't think that anyone will listen. And why would they? I mean, what happens when men speak up, right? They've already been put into what Mao called a black category. So, in Mao's China, they would create black categories. And if you fall into that, then you will be dismissed. You're allowed to be dismissed right out. And men is one of the first ones we did. That's why when, you have, the discussions on, I don't know, abortion, or the discussions on what children are learning in schools, like the queering of children or things like that. It's always mothers that are there making a fuss because the men, they're not allowed to talk about it, right? So, my body, my choice, whatever it is. So men have to stay quiet. And that also applies to things like sexual assault and interpersonal violence. So men don't speak up because they've already been sort of put in their in their little, I guess you could say like a cage, or where, a stable, and they're told to stay there until we ask them for their opinion. But after this, I think more men are realizing that, their mental health matters. They need help, and they're going to ask for it. So have you I mean, do you do this as a practice? Do you like okay, so have you seen a change in like your clients?
Well, as I say, the biggest change I saw was when three guys got in touch with me on the one day when Depp took the stand. I have heard some people that I have worked with talking about how the Depp case sort of opened their eyes and made them feel, actually, yeah, I'm not a millionaire like he is, but hey, do you know what? Maybe it's a good time for male victims to be heard now and finally be acknowledged. And I know that other colleagues that I work closely with or that I supervise, they've also said, yeah, we've had people mentioning Johnny Depp, and they've said, oh, well, this happened to me when I was younger, or my ex did this to me, and I never thought it was abuse, but actually now I've heard Depp, I'm like, yeah, I suppose it was abuse. And often what I find as well is that you get guys that go, well, this person, they didn't physically hurt me, and I didn't feel scared, so it can't be abuse. Yes, it can. You can absolutely be abused in lots of ways. You might not feel fear, and you might not feel physical pain, but it can still be sexual abuse, domestic abuse. It's not defined by how you feel or any pain, the severity of the pain you're caused. If your partner is constantly slapping you across the face and you don't want them to, and you don't feel scared, but you're angry and you feel disrespected, and then that's domestic abuse. It doesn't, whether you feel terrified or not, whether it physically hurts a lot or just a little bit, it's still abuse.
Absolutely, 100%. Well, I'm gonna have to wrap it up. I do have another super chow from, I think, the same person for $5. Thank you, anonymous guy. And they say, would you include male genital mutilation as a topic in a second edition?
I don't know. Maybe. I mean, I think I'd need to know more about. I don't want to write about things that I don't know a lot about. So I wouldn't say no. I think at the minute I'm just trying to deal with the fact that this is out there. The idea of writing the idea of writing another book fills me with dread. I don't.
How long did it take you? At least a year, at least a year, right?
Far too long. Rewritten 3 times too long. So I think before I even consider writing another book about anything, I want to just chill and relax from this first. I think there's other people out there that are probably better placed than me. It's not about me doing it. It's about the right person doing it, and I'm not sure right now that I'm the right person. Yeah. And you are you pretty self-critical about your work? I can be. I mean, sometimes I like to think that I'm balanced and I'm rational. Sometimes I'm completely crazy and completely irrational, and I need to just close the world off and be on my own, and a fresh pair of eyes comes in and goes, Phil, you're being stupid. That's sometimes what I need. So
you're pretty happy with the way this turned out then, or are you unsure?
I'm happy enough. I'm happy enough. I'll go with that. I'm happy that it's done. I'm happy enough with how it turned. So I've read the hard copy, and I'm like, oh god, that full stop needs to go there. There should be a gap between that there. And I'm like, but I'm like, do you know what? It's not going to be perfect. Every well-known book in the world has got I'm not going to worry. Yeah,
if you wait until it's perfect, it'll never happen.
Exactly.
So it's got to come out there. People can nitpick it if they want to, but I'm sure that overall the central messaging is there. So again, that's The Sexual Abuse of Boys and Men, Creating an Approach for Neglected Victims. Look for it on paperback, and I guess wait on the Greg Ellis audiobook. I'm kidding. But pick it up, because if he makes enough on it, then he can like do more, with it. And I think that more books on subjects like this need to come out, and they need to come to the forefront. So a couple of final thoughts before we wrap up. So number one, what are you working? I mean, I know you're not doing a book, but what else are you doing right now other than your therapy work and stuff? Are you still doing blogs? Are you doing any interviews? Are you appearing on other podcasts?
So it's interesting. I did a podcast immediately before this one, so I was trying to kind of balance. I did a podcast, so I'm doing a few podcasts. I've got a few others coming up, just talking about the book and other things as well. I'm kind of working a bit less. I'm fortunate enough that actually I'm rather than working 5 days a week, because I'm thinking of going down and working 4 days a week. So just to have a little bit more time, chill out, relax, that sort of thing. I'm doing I'm kind of doing less, to be honest. I'm chilling out, relaxing. But Monday to Thursday, seeing boys and men in therapy, 1-to-1, supervising people. And the one thing that I am in the early stages of working on is creating a very short video with a filmmaker, 10 minutes, probably not even that long, which will address male-friendly ways of working with boys and men. So simply put, it'll be a short video where it might be me, I don't know, but you'll have the therapist and a man or a young boy having a therapy session, and it's all the traditional therapeutic responses, and then the video rewinds and it starts again, but the therapist responds in more male-friendly ways, and it's kind of looking at the difference. And so I'm working on that. With script is being created. We're going to get
exciting.
an that's something that's in the pipeline, but that's a few months away yet. We're still working on the script, and that's what we're doing at the moment.
Yeah, well, when you get that done, send it to us and we'll share it and share it on all our media too, because that sounds like it'll be a lot of fun and really interesting to look at. Okay, so I feel like there was one other thing that I am failing to remember. Let me just look at the this book again. I think this is good. Is there any final thoughts or anything that you want to share? Something I didn't ask or that you wanted to mention?
So one of the chapters of the book, I'm just having a look in my copy now because I can never remember. I've looked at this book so many times, I'm sick of looking at it. So I would say that chapter 10 of the book, Nurture, Environment and Sexually Abused Males, I think that there's something in there for everyone, because it doesn't just look at the disadvantages facing sexually abused boys and how society treats them. It kind of touches also upon misandry and the disadvantages and how boys and men are hated, how they're treated, that sort of thing. So I kind of highlight it in relation to, well, if boys and men are being told this, then how are sexually abused boys and men going to feel? What are they going to think? And all of that sort of stuff. So it's a sort of chapter on how those issues affect boys and men who've been abused, but you can also read it as, if you like, as a standalone chapter, as, oh my God, these are all the disadvantages boys and men face. This is how society, government and the media treats boys and men. And so that on its own could be something, whether you're into sexual abuse or not.
No, very cool. I mean, we all have to have our own approaches, and then hopefully everybody, coming from different positions, we come together and we're all moving towards the same place. We're just coming at it from different starting points. So
yeah.
All right, so we're gonna close it out here. I don't have any more super chats or super chows. I want to thank you guys for coming on the show. I want to thank you, Mr. Mitchell, for joining us, despite all of our technical goofs in the beginning. But we'll have this figured out by next week. But this stream will stay up. So thank you so much for coming on and telling us about your book. One last time, that book is The Sexual Abuse of Boys and Men, Creating an Approach for Neglected Victims. It's about, £13, $12.99. I don't know how much that is in American dollars, but I think that in Amazon it probably translates just fine. But yeah, so about £13. Looks like it'd be very useful. Definitely check it out. And we're going to wrap it up. So if you guys like this video, please hit like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed, hit the bell for notifications, leave us a comment, let us know what you guys think about what we discussed on the show today, and please, please, please share this video, because sharing is caring. Thank you guys so much for coming on today's episode of Fireside Chat. Thank you to our guests, and we will talk to you all in the next video.
Thank you.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.